So in week 3, we began to explore PAILs and rails, which are acronyms. PAILs stands for Progressive Angular Isometric Loading, and rails stands for Regressive Angular Isometric Loading. These are fancy terms for challenging the tissue on both sides of a joint in an end range of its rotation. The progressive aspect of PAILs means challenging the tissue that we're attempting to lengthen and get more range of motion out of. And the R in rails stands for regressive, or challenging the tissue that is shortening and pulling us into that range of motion. So as you practice and explore your PAILs and rails in between classes this week, let's go over some of the best practices for exploring PAILs and rails. First, we're going to start with warm tissue. This can be from a run. This can be from an exercise class. It can also come from cars. So before I PAILs and rails my knee, for example, I'm going to begin with a handful of knee cars, working my way up into a decent squeeze, and then perhaps a handful of capsular cars, exploring that rotational tissue, just to get it a little warm and prepared for the work that we're going to do. When we get into the PAILs and rails, we're going to rotate to one end range, or what our joint is capable of. We'll hold that stretch or hold that position for a handful of breaths just to settle in. As we build into our effort for this week, we'll explore around the 40, maybe 50% of whatever you consider to be your safest and greatest effort mark. As we're developing that effort, and this, for this example, I've externally rotated my knee, my shin. As I'm building toward that 40 or 50%, I'm not going to jump there instantly. We want to build gradually. We'll take about 5 seconds to do so. So here, I'm going to fight to rotate my shin inward, finding some of that back of knee stuff, and I'll build 10% to 20 to 30 to 40, maybe to 50. We're going to hold that effort for 20 seconds, a smooth 40 or 50%, holding, holding, holding. When we switch, we're going to slowly ramp down the stretch the way we came in, take a breath in, gather ourselves, and then actively squeeze the opposite side of the joint, trying to work for more active rotation in the direction we're attempting to expand. And we'll again hold for about 20 seconds and ramp on down. Great. 1 set is great. 2 sets can also be great. Once we're done with our PAILs and rails, we're going to reintegrate the squeezy stuff that we just worked on by wrapping up with a handful of cars. All things told, maybe 3 minutes per joint. This is also true of the hip joint. We'll begin, whether seated or standing, with a handful of hip cars to begin to warm up that tissue. We can then layer in a handful of our capsular cars as we've practiced from a few different positions. Here, here, and then we'll get set up in our hands and knees position and work our way into the stretch, where we'll hold for a handful of breaths before applying our 2 efforts. The first one being fighting the foot into the object that's blocking it. The second being pulling the foot away, or thinking about pulling the foot away from the object that's blocking it. When done, we'll again follow up with a handful more of hip cars to reintegrate that work into the full global ball and socket rotation.